Awesome. Great. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Monique Priestley, the founder and executive director of the Space on Main Co-working and Community Center located in Bradford, Vermont. Originally, this was going to be a brunch and a meet and greet and a forum and in person. I think it was the day that the state shut everything down. So we've asked everybody back, and luckily everybody is, I think things are in a lull about to get busy again. But thank you all for joining. And yeah, so we have an amazing panel. Housing conversations have definitely, they were important before, that I feel like they're even more kind of important right now, especially as things have shifted with COVID. We're going to do, I think, shoot for leave maybe 20 minutes for questions. We have so many panelists and questions that I don't know we're going to get too deep with anybody, but definitely this is like a first. We've never really had this kind of, I guess, far-reaching engaged housing discussion, at least in our area. And I'd love to start that, and then as people, walk away with further questions that might be unanswered, or people that are panelists that think that we really need to explore a certain area further, I would love to do for future events as well. For facilitation-wise, this is set up as a webinar, so any of the people who are in as attendees, if you won't be able to chat or vocally kind of talk, but you'll be able to raise your hands and use the Q&A, and we'll all be able to see the Q&A that you're asking. And then at the end, when we're doing the kind of question and answer, you can unmute yourselves and talk once you've raised your hand. This is being streamed on Facebook, and then it's also being recorded, and it will be posted to the Space on Main's website. I'll just show you that super quick. So the spaceonmain.org/housing, and then your kind of the panelists, resources that the panelists have sent, and I'll also post the recording as well.
Monique, could you see if you get my photo up again?
Yep. And then any type of reports or handouts that the panelists might have, I'll also post to that page as well. And let me, before we start real quick, Mike's wife said he's on a Zoom, but not necessarily this one, so I want to text her. So when Mike gets on, we'll have Michael Keiss from Vital Communities. I've got Gustave Seelig from Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, Eric Schmitt from Evernorth, formerly known as Housing Vermont, Kevin Geiger from Rivers-Ottauquechee Regional Planning Commission, Seth Leonard from Vermont Housing Finance Authority, Linda Anderson and Ramsey Papp from Capstone Community Action, Sarah Holzer. And Sarah, what's your partner/husband's name?
It's Steve.
Hi, Steve. Steve Holzer from Bradford Farm Apartments, Dale Bromley and Darren Sherburne from Four Seasons Sotheby's International, the Fairley office, and Eileen Peltier from Downstreet Housing. Thank you all. I think first I kind of wanted to start a little bit local with Sarah and Steve, and ask about kind of your, I know I was emailing a little bit with Sarah and just thought there was some really good stuff we should hear locally. Could you maybe share like how many units and occupants you have, where they work, kind of why they choose Bradford, and then when they move out, are they sticking around, are they leaving? Yeah.
Way to go. We bought the property, for those of you that know Bradford, it was an old Huntington property, Huntington Terrace, just south of Kinney Drugs intersection on Route 5. And we renovated, this was 6 years ago, so 2014, we gutted and renovated and shuffled the existing tenants around. It wasn't fully occupied, it needed a lot of work. And it was kind of a newer project for us. All our other properties have been in cities next to mostly young professionals or next to colleges, grad students. And this was a different community for us. And so when we first owned the property, it had a bad reputation for the police being called a lot. Apparently, it was a weekly occurrence. Mostly very nice people, but just people that basically stayed at home almost all day. Everybody, for the most part, when we first owned it, we would go there and everybody was sitting on their porch. A lot of people, Section 8, a lot of government support and subsidizing of the tenants, and those people the only people that we didn't renew their lease were problem tenants and people that couldn't pay their rent, and there was a lot of that. We still have a couple of the original tenants that were there when we bought the property. One, she's actually out of work right now. She works at the Lake Maury Inn and Resort, and another of the original tenants works at pizza place is it Lebanon? Lebanon. So we renovated and, fixed up the neighborhood, so to speak, like a lot of the neighbors said. We really have wonderful tenants. It's a mixture of people that can't afford a house and never will, and that's a whole separate problem. People that work full time that don't get paid enough to be able to buy a house. But there's some people there that really call it home, and that's it for forever and ever, according to them. And as long as they say that unless we kick them out, they're going to stay forever. And for the time being, we have full occupancy, people calling us every week looking for available apartments. And so we turn a lot of people away. But I think it's a nice place to live. Everybody enjoys it. And I would say the percentage of people that are there to stay, maybe a quarter.
Yeah, maybe a quarter that will be with us for a long time.
The others are people that are new to the area and haven't decided where they want to settle. But the bulk of them, I would say, 2/3 of the people are there to rent and save up money and then buy a house someday. Of the tenants, I think we calculated 19 units. Most of them are families, couples with kids. A few of them have single people, and then a handful with couples without kids, mostly older couples, people that are, the kids are grown and gone, or they just never had kids in the first place. Only 2 live there and work in Bradford, I think.
I think that, yeah. Sounds right.
I'm trying to think of who.
It's what we mainly see is people that are looking for rent to be a little bit cheaper, that work in the Hanover, Lebanon area, and they want to be within a half hour of work, but it's just so prohibitively expensive outside of that circle. So Bradford is really the first place that they come to that they can afford.
Yeah, and I think we try to make the apartments nice enough that people want to be there. We renovated, added a wood pellet boiler for half the property for more green energy, created green space, community garden, picnic table, swing set. So it's desirable enough and close enough to Norwich, Thetford, Lebanon, Hanover is the main place that people work. We've got teachers, nurses, a whole bunch of people that work at Dartmouth.
When they move out, like, are you seeing them buy houses, or do you think that they're staying in the Bradford area, or do you think they're moving down to Leb?
The people that every once in a while we ask somebody to leave if there are problems. So there might be one person a year, one person every other year now. They tend to stay in Bradford. We don't know where they go because we haven't left on good terms. The people that leave otherwise of their own accord.
We see about 1 tenant a year that stays with us for several years, saves up their money, and then buys a house in the area.
but not in Bradford that we're aware of. Most people, when they leave because of a job change, so they're leaving the area entirely or just far enough away that they can't live in Bradford anymore. People that buy houses are usually young couples that rented from us and saved up for a few years, and then they buy a house, but it's not, it hasn't
Fairly,
been in,
Orford.
right. It hasn't been
Bedford.
it hasn't been in Bradford, but
Okay.
surrounding town, within a half hour.
Well, thank you.
Mhm.
And Eileen, I saw you shaking your head. I was wondering, since you have so many apartments in Bradford, like, are you seeing similar things, or what are you seeing at Downstreet?
Thank you, Sarah and Steve. That was great to hear your perspective. And honestly, quite similar for the most part. We tend to have residents who stay a long time. We have people that, come and maybe go, not on good terms, to use Sarah's word. Most of so Colonial Village is 21 apartments and is all subsidized. We acquired that from the Huntington Estates in 15, I think. So we've had that for a little while. And then Waits River is the project, on South Main that is 6 different buildings, 29 units in total. And we have about half of those have subsidized units. And I think one of the big things, so maybe I'll take a moment and explain that. So affordable housing typically is going to serve a population that is at 60 to 80% of the area median income. But then in addition to it, an individual like was at Huntington Terrace prior to Sarah and Steve being there, might have a voucher, right? So that, and if they have a Section 8 voucher, or we have what are called project-based vouchers, so essentially in effect the same thing, but it stays with the unit versus the person. Those vouchers serve individuals at 30% and below, and essentially you're paying, a small amount of your total income. And if your income is very small, you're paying a very, very small amount, as low as potentially, $25 or $50 a month. So very, very deeply affordable. So we have a mix of that at Waits River. And then we have the Whistle Stop Mobile Home Park as well, where there are 12 lots there. We have 9 occupied now and 3 new units coming in, hopefully in January, February timeframe. So yeah, our experience has been somewhat of a mixed bag over the years. When we first developed this way back in 2007, we really struggled to actually lease it up. And I think this is one of the important things to recognize. This is Waits River I'm referring to, because we didn't have those vouchers. And so because the incomes are low in Bradford, people actually couldn't afford the affordable housing to be, it wasn't affordable enough, deeply affordable. And we since then have gotten more vouchers into that property. And those, people tend to stay in them. It's deeply affordable. It works for them. It serves their needs. So, but, I also think there are this, I guess I don't want to define success of home ownership. I think, that we don't want to I don't like when we think of housing as sort of like, it's better to have a home than to have an apartment. People have different desires and interests, but the people who have gone into, home ownership, I think it's sort of a similar thing. You get 1 or 2 people a year in our portfolio in Bradford who successfully are doing that. So yeah, I think I'll stop talking there for now, and I'm sure circle back.
Cool. Thanks, Eileen. Linda and Ramsey, I'm actually wondering, are in this same vein, do you have anything you wanted to add about what you're seeing with your housing properties and the clients that you're serving in our area? And maybe tell people what Capstone does too.
Sure. So I can do an overview of Capstone and give you some numbers, and then Ramsey could talk a little bit more in depth about sort of the people that we're seeing and trying to help. So Capstone Community Action is one of 5 community action agencies throughout the state, and we have a housing counseling program for folks who are either literally homeless or on the verge of homelessness. We also offer weatherization services. We help people connect to food and crisis fuel assistance. We have an early Head Start and a Head Start program, and we have a community economic development program that helps people with budget coaching, small business. Our main goal is to help people move out of poverty, and we understand to do that we've got to be able to wrap around them with a variety of services. So that's sort of in a couple of breaths who we are. So I did a little research for a different project that I'm working on, and Ramsey is our housing counselor for Orange and Northern Windsor counties. So she sees people in the Bradford area. Between July 1st, 2019 and June 30th of 2020, we saw 16 households out of the Bradford area that we provided services to. 22, that represented 22 adults and 19 children. We were able to stabilize 12 of those households. And 5 of the households we were able to stabilize within 28 days, 3 within 60 days, 2 within 90 days, and 2 within over 100. It took over 100 days to stabilize a couple of those households. So that's just some basic data. And Ramsey, do you want to talk a little more about the program?
Yes. So in the Bradford area, so right now is an anomaly because of COVID. We are not able to help with as much. Well, we could help, but there's not. The eviction moratorium is sort of changing the way that we have helped in the past. We've seen a lot more clients that are prevention, which typically is either if people are precariously housed, which could be staying with family, couch surfing, or helping people who have had some kind of problem in their life that has affected their income so that they couldn't pay rent, so they're behind, helping them with that. Last year I was actually busier, I think, in Bradford than I was in most of the rest of Orange County, with clients trying to stabilize them, and then also trying to find housing. And the perpetual problem that we have is trying to find that affordable housing, or having openings at Downstreet or other places that are affordable, because a bulk of the people I work with either are getting just Social Security, or they are in full-time jobs, or a couple jobs that don't pay them enough to really afford something else. This year, because of COVID, there's a lot of people who are sort of continuously being put up in hotels if they have been homeless, which is a whole nother issue to address, because a lot of people who are homeless for a reason. And a lot of times if they're homeless and cannot find housing, or cannot get accepted into housing, it's because maybe they had some problems in the past with housing. So they have evictions on their record, or often it's because they just don't have, there's programs that we have that can help people get into housing, pay security deposits and things like that. But if their income is not enough to support the ongoing housing, it's been hard in the past to try to find vouchers and things like that. Right now those are available, but the housing itself is not really so available, which makes it really difficult. It feels like a lot of times when the housing is available, the money's not available, and when the money's available, the housing's not available. So it's a frustrating kind of yo-yo effect. And I think that's it for now.
Thanks, Nancy. I think Dale and Darren, if you could switch, so they're here from Four Seasons Sotheby's International, and it would be great to kind of hear what you're seeing as far as housing availability trends, one maybe pre-COVID and now COVID. Just what are you seeing with the housing market?
I think we might have to get Dale unmute back on. Okay, and
I think,
the video back up too.
Okay.
I think my photos disappeared again.
Okay, I just prompted you again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I think that interesting listening to the Holzers. I think what they've done to the community is just so terrific. You can see the whole area of Bradford sort of moving upscale, and I think that's great. It just makes it so much easier for us to find good properties that we can sell to first-time buyers. But the interesting thing, I was looking this morning, a couple of years ago, we had 30 houses on the market in Bradford. Today we have 2 or 3. So that's a real problem. And I don't know how to increase it. COVID, as was just pointed out, COVID is really hurting us badly with the whole state being locked down yesterday or the day before. We can't get anybody in here even to look at properties, or sellers to come in from out of state to think about putting them on the market. So that's kind of my take on it. I think we've got to get through this somehow and come out the other side, and we'll all be better for it. So that's my comment for going forward.
And Gail and Darren, like, what do you, just thinking like post-COVID, what do you think maybe opportunities are, or things that we should prioritize as a town or a region, as far as when you are able to start selling again and people are able to build again and all that?
Darren, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I would really love to see the streets that run against Goshen, seeing more houses come on the market there, because we are seeing a lot of success in Newberry Village with smaller properties, 0.45 acres, half an acre properties. It'd be really great to see some of those houses come on the market, maybe be refurbished, and then attract people like that are looking to work in Hanover, like was mentioned earlier, someone who doesn't necessarily want to pay the rental fee to live in Hanover or that area, maybe something that's right off 91. That's my personal belief. I mean, I would also just, like Dale said, more houses in Bradford. And we since I've been working with Dale, we've been working primarily out of the Newberry area. And that's been a majority of our business in these past 6 months.
Great, thanks guys. And maybe Kevin, can I jump to you, just thinking like regionally from the Two Rivers-Ottauquechee Regional Planning Commission, like I know you guys have done kind of extensive housing studies and a lot of work in like the Lebanon, Hanover stuff area, but what are you seeing as far as trends of people buying what they want, demographics, that kind of stuff?
Look, I can cover a little bit. I can't speak to the real estate side so well,
Yeah,
but just to give folks a brief overview of the scale of the issue. We have roughly 4,000 households, so maybe 8,000 people in Orange County that are spending too much of their money today on houses, be that rent or ownership. Of that, about 400 roughly are in Bradford. We have about 1,300 houses in Bradford. So if we think about the scale of the issue, I need 3 times the entire number of houses in Bradford built again that are affordable today. So that's, you can spend a lot of time fiddling with numbers, but you don't ask how big an avalanche is when it's coming at you. You go, that's an avalanche. And so this is that scale that we need. I think another issue, and I'm sure the realtors are aware of it, is that if it pencils out, ooh, I've got that house. I was reading some stories this morning. I finally found that house I can buy. I got a lot of money saved. I can eke up. There is enough money and enough computer power now that I can buy all those houses faster than you can. And so as soon as they hit the market, I can buy 300 houses in cash every day in the state of Vermont. And so we have to look at how that, and then, I own them as profit making, and you don't get to buy them as a new family. I think we have to look at how that issue is going to play out. The big thing I operate in is in the public realm. And so I think from my point of view, I'm glad to see the towns talking about this. It is essential that the public view housing as a public issue, just like a sewer system or a fire department, and that we look at a public response. And along those lines, to me, I do plans and I do zoning, and I've worked with Bradford in that. I think the essence of plans comes down to deciding that you want something, and not that you kind of want it, but that you actually want it. And then dealing with your zoning. And Bradford's actually done really good stuff on their zoning in the past couple of years to look at taking those lots along Main Street and basically being able, you could probably double the density in most of those lots. Looking back up on the side streets behind the lots that front on Main Street. And thinking about, you have a sidewalk, you have sewer, you have water, you've got all the things that the public built to make that lot worthwhile. and trying to recapture some of that value out there. There is just traipsing around Bradford, there is a lot of opportunity. There's, we hear a lot that there's no place to build. There, you could build hundreds of units in Bradford today on existing lots that have sewer and water, and it would just make the town go round. The other thing I want to put a quick plug in is because the Holzers mentioned, people with kids there. You have a family with 2 kids, right? That's like $18,000 that the state's giving you in education aid every year. That family moves out and buys a starter home in Bradford. They're spending less than $18,000 on their mortgage. It is cheaper for the school to buy their house than for them to move out of town with their 2 kids. That's the economics of the situation, and we should understand that in a public realm. That's it for me.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Awesome. I think if I could maybe go to like Eric, Seth, Gus, and I think also that your organizations might be a little less known to like the general public. And I was wondering, could you, when you do your, when you add something, could you just give us a little bit of background about what you do and kind of what you're seeing? Because I know you're seeing more like you're seeing locally in instances and then regionally and then statewide, which I think is really important. Start with Eric.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, Evernorth is very new. We merged with a syndicator in Portland, Maine. So Evernorth is a developer of affordable housing, a syndicator of affordable housing, and we also have Evernorth Rural Ventures, which is a syndicator of new market tax credits, which invests in businesses, business expansion, new business. We have right now, and throughout the state, we have about 3,500 apartments throughout the state. And we partner with our local housing partners, such as Downstreet, in developing. We package up the equity and provide equity so that the equity that goes into the affordable housing allows the property to be affordable. And I just wanted to add, I've got some data points that I just wanted to share throughout the state. Within 3,200 apartments that I've looked at, 53% of our residents have less than 30% of area median income. And 54% of our earned income households are paying more than 30% of their income towards rent. A lot of those don't have vouchers. So we're talking about vouchers quite a bit. The need for project-based assistance or tenant-based assistance is still out there. And I think the tenant-based vouchers would be much more, more helpful to get out to folks. 63% of our residents receive some form of subsidy, some form of government assistance, whether it's project-based or it's the tenant bringing the subsidy. And our average income throughout those 3,200 households, the average income, and the households are from one person household to a 6-person household. The average income is $21,600 in those 3,200 units. So it's we're serving a very low income base. One of the initiatives that we've been working on is really to try to supplement or bring additional resources to our residents. A biggie is Wi-Fi and trying to get Wi-Fi infrastructure into households. It's been like, I've been talking about Wi-Fi a lot. But I think it's a resource that we can bring into low-income communities if there's a large enough, if it's 20 units in one building, bring it in and provide free Wi-Fi to residents. And you're spending the money, but what you're doing is what's happening is I think we're stabilizing the households more. So we're I think we're allowing them to have more income. Even if it's only $30 a month or $40 a month, they're saving it in the cable expense. A lot of our residents are dropping their cable. So just that little bit of money helps to stabilize the households. And so we're reducing our turnover and we're keeping an eye on that. anyways, if there's other questions about Evernorth, just let me know. I don't want to take up too much time.
Sure. Thanks, Eric. And just real quick too, there are some people that are starting to ask Q&A, which is awesome. So if you haven't found it, there's a little Q&A button in the bottom of your Zoom panel. So definitely feel free to put stuff in there. We're seeing those, and we'll get to Q&A for sure. Seth?
Yeah, so I provided Monique a sheet that gives some of the information that's available at housingdata.org. So I won't spit too many numbers from a Bradford standpoint at you. Hard to remember. One I do want to piggyback on Eric's is we do have a metric on there that shows Wi-Fi access for communities. And right now, as a state, we're at 77.31% of our of households getting 25 megabytes per second, and Bradford's at 74.738. So doing pretty good, but not quite up to that state average. If I can just zoom up a little bit, since our agency's focused on statewide housing investments. So in addition to managing the large informational database you can find at housingdata.org, we are the entity that distributes the state's state and federal tax credits that are then used to develop affordable housing. And in addition to that, we also do a lot of monitoring, making sure that those homes stay affordable and stay safe and decent for the communities that they're serving. We have a supply side problem in Vermont, right? And that's really clear, and it's something we sometimes dance around a bit. So we have 90,000 renter and owner households that are cost burdened. We mentioned that Bradford has 43% of your households being cost burdened. That means that they're paying more than 30% of their income for their housing alone. So you can think about what a burden that instantaneously puts on a household. And then in addition to that, your severely cost burdened households are higher than the state average as well, which is people who are paying 50% or more for their housing. So in our state, just to meet the status quo of where we're at today, to meet average over the next 5 years, we would have to construct 2,629 new additional housing units in our state. And if we want to actually bring down and lower and meet reasonable target goals for affordability, we actually need to build about 20,536 units of housing in our state in the next 5 years. The good news is there's not a one-size-fit-all set of policies and things that you as a community have to think about doing to try to help meet that goal and to try to meet your own needs, right? Housing policy is nuanced, and there are a lot of different levers to pull, and there's not one set of policies that you just grab and use. It's sometimes in communities not about building new shiny buildings, it's about rehabilitating the stock that you have, or revitalizing and reactivating underutilized properties. So really what we try to do, again at housingdata.org, is provide some toolkits to start that conversation where you're making information-based and best practice-based policy decisions and supporting what your community's vision is. But the first step to that is really coming up with that vision itself, right? It's about having that conversation and knowing where it is you want to go before you just start pulling policy levers, because you could have severely unintended outcomes on that. So I'll stop there and look forward to the rest of the conversation.
Cool, thanks Seth. Gus?
So good morning, everybody. I'm Gus Seelig. I'm with the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. The board is a statewide entity that administers both a state housing trust fund and a number of federal grant programs. And as you might imagine in our name, our mission is not just toward housing. Over the years in Bradford, we've invested in probably about 75 homes and apartments and something like 1,600 acres of land, including 7 farm parcels. We're very involved and with the Wrights Mountain acquisitions, Devil's Den, those sorts of assets. We also have a very small program for historic buildings that function as community gathering places. And some years ago, we helped with the library. And so as you think about what makes your community more attractive, I certainly think recreation resources are a really important thing, and historic resources may be ways that we can help the community in addition to our housing work. Others have described the fundamental dilemma that we deal with in terms of affordable housing, and Seth has just described the fact that we have a supply problem. We've certainly had in Bradford a housing quality problem. It sounds like the Holzers have addressed, and I know that was a big part of when Downstreet first came into the community, a big part of the focus, and we were funders of that effort. And improving the quality of housing stock has been a big part of our work, along with adding supply wherever we can. It's great to hear that you've been working on your zoning. I think that opens up lots of possibilities for the right kind of growth and the right kind of vitality in your village. So I think those are all good things to have been doing. The reality of what housing costs these days to build, I often say affordable housing is an oxymoron. When Seth and I are working together, whether it's on single family or multifamily new buildings, the costs are well in excess of what anybody who's at the median income in Vermont can afford when you're looking at new construction. So I think the comment from the realtors of looking for smaller homes, hoping they'll come on the market as starter homes for people, is really important, kind of a thing to be working on. And our focus is primarily on those Vermonters who are most cost burdened most of the time. But we are interested, and we have worked up and down the valley in adding units and doing new construction projects as well. Some of them we did so long ago that you may not think of them as new anymore, but there's an elderly project up in Newbury that we worked on some years ago. And our most recent investment in Bradford was with Veterans Place, with some federal money to make that facility more COVID safe, more resistant to the transmission of illness. So our job is to get tax dollars back to local communities. We do that through nonprofits primarily, and we've had a great working relationship with Downstreet as the people most on the ground in your community to get that done. So I'll stop there for now, and happy to deal with questions as they come up.
Cool, thank you, Gus. Hi, Mike. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Eileen. And then I'll go to Mike.
I'm just wanting to follow up with something in the report that Seth sent out this morning.
Yeah, let me
so
super quick
sentence.
Chat. Sorry, I just put a link in there for people.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So one of the things it talks about is sort of the 24 household per year growth rate since 2010 in Bradford. But at the same time, in that growth primarily being among homeowners. But at the same time, we've lost 91 renter households since 2010. And I'm wondering, if Dale or if any of you who are more local can help me understand what's going on there and what you all think the vacancy rate currently is, or does anyone actually know what it is in Bradford today? Because I think that would help frame. I guess my question is, the number of people who need more affordable housing versus the number of people who don't have a home to live in are not necessarily tied, right? So is it an issue of adding more units, or is it an issue of bringing more affordability to Bradford? That's what I'm trying to get my head around.
Yeah, and anybody who wants to address that.
I would just say Dale and I don't work with rental properties, so we work exclusively in the residential market, so we really can't contribute to this, unfortunately, because we only deal in the purchases of homes, mortgages, etc. So unfortunately, we don't have that data for you.
Does anybody know where the 91 units disappear from? I mean, that's really surprises me. Okay, well, that's
maybe the first that's like a follow-up. We need to figure that out. Hey, Seth, go ahead.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask Kevin if you're seeing shifting in communities in terms of housing units, if you're seeing, if you're sensing that there's a net loss, net gain transfer that's occurring, and if there's a sense on the ground beyond the data that we can provide that only stays at a very high level, if there's a sense that when things are being constructed somewhere else, if it's drawing in closer to the employers from the maybe slightly more peripheral counties?
I think we're seeing a couple of things, although we don't have good data on it, that we're seeing properties convert to secondary or, Airbnb type stuff out there. And so that may show up as a house with a mortgage, but it's not a, primary residence at all. And so we're losing some of our housing stock that way. We're not seeing a lot of kind of standard market stuff go into the core areas. It's still kind of higgledy-piggledy out and about for a variety of reasons, I think, and that there are no big price pressures or regulatory pressures to say you got to build over here versus out there if you can still drive and whatnot.
Can I just ask specifically about, the 91 unit loss? I imagined it some to do with Airbnb, but also are we seeing more properties coming offline? So people just are choosing not to rent because, maybe they've had a challenging experience with the tenant, abandoned properties or just not kind of online properties. Is that part of what we're seeing in Bradford as well? Because that's certainly happening in other communities around the state.
Yeah, I don't know on that. That'd be a good issue to find out.
There are times, and again, it's hard to track this, that we've seen in high home ownership pressure areas that a loss of ownership can sometimes be primarily comprised of duplexes. So if you string this out over what is essentially a 10-year data set, right? It's since 2010, where duplexes that were formerly not owner-occupied and leased because of home ownership pressures in the area cause folks to buy them and owner-occupy them, that can sometimes be causal for a slow bleed.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thanks, Eileen. I think it's something we need to look into. And great, so Mike jumped on too. So Michael's from Vital Communities. Mike, so we've just been, this is actually a great place for you to jump in. We kind of went around, worked our way up from Bradford statewide, just kind of at this point, trends that people are seeing, needs that people are seeing, if you have like demographic ideas. And then I think we're probably I had some questions, but I feel like everybody's answered them here and there. And there's a lot of questions in the Q&A, so we'll switch to some attendee questions after Mike.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. Sorry I couldn't join at 10.
No worries.
Actually working on an investment concept for creation of homes in our region. So we'll see if that comes to fruition. Maybe I'll have more news about that. The reason Vital Communities exists is because we are a bunch of small towns in 2 states, and those formal borders can get in the way of collaboration. So Vital Communities formed as an organization, it's been over 25 years now, to help people communicate and work together and think together and plan together, about the big issues that affect us as interdependent communities. Our community lines are not necessarily our town lines or our state lines. I'm sure we all have family, friends, jobs, work, things we go and do inside and outside of Bradford. And I think anecdotally, I've heard that each of us has things we think of as our hubs. It's kind of, I live in Thetford, Vermont, and I tend to think of Bradford as my northern hub and White River Junction sort of my southern hub when I think about where do I go shopping or services, or if I want to go for a bike ride, where it's stuff like that. So I feel like that is a common a common feeling across our region, and so I work for an organization that helps people come together to think collectively about challenges like how do we make sure we have homes for all of our needs? How do we make sure we're meeting our energy requirements now and in the future? Transportation, leadership, food. So these are all things where we're connected. So I'm glad to be joining you this morning. I guess just in terms of evolving needs, this won't. I think the data's already been put out there a lot, but over the past decades, really since the 80s, we haven't been creating very many more places to live, and people are talking about losses, just natural losses of things getting old or catastrophes or places wearing down. We've barely nationally, just a national challenge. Nationally, we've just been building at the replacement rate for things that are going away. And also the types of things we've created, tended to create over the past decades have tended to be larger places or apartments. So we have a single family home, multiple bedrooms. I looked, I think the average bedroom size for Bradford around the area is 4 to 5 bedrooms. Our households have been going down, so we have 2 people living in those single family units with 4 or 5 bedrooms. And then the other thing we've been building is kind of apartments, or Maggie Pratt's example, an assisted living type facility and so we've been building at both of those ends. That's been happening in our area as well as around the country over the last decades. So I think then, I'd throw out our collective challenge and opportunity is where we're going to build new stuff. How do we help each other do the duplexes, triplexes, small apartment blocks, apartments over stores, mixed use in walkable downtowns or close to downtowns, main streets, things like that. That kind of stuff can be affordable, and it can use existing resources, so we don't have to try to invest in new resources. And I think then the other opportunity comes in, we've got these single family homes around our communities that have empty bedrooms, and how can we, I think there's that's a reservoir of potential places to live. So can we tap into people's personal needs and the community needs they feel to support each other in having, I'll say, renting a room in a house be a more common thing. And we think about adding an ADU, and we think about a pretty expensive addition, perhaps. Are there ways to live together, which we've done more of in the past, and collectively meet our housing needs that way. So those are kind of trends I've been thinking about. I didn't get to hear everybody else's introduction, so but those are things that I think that we can maybe work on together. That's where opportunity, I think, lies. So,
Thanks.
Mike's opinion.
Thanks. And I was just thinking too, I know Two Rivers has the Keys to the Valley, Vital Communities does business roundtables, and I know Capstone's working on a task force, a housing task force. So there's, we'll make sure to, if any organizations want to include links or information to those, I'll put them on the housing page. But I just think there's ongoing opportunities to be involved in the housing discussion that people might not be aware of. And I know we're not going to answer all the questions here, so I'm going to just take some of the Q&A. One is kind of Thetford focused, but I think it can easily be turned into a broader discussion of as far as towns trying to decide sites and need for affordable housing, and kind of what strategies they would use to do that. Does anybody have any kind of recommendations on kind of where that starts, who to involve if they're not involving any of your organizations, that kind of thing?
I could jump in there a little bit, Monique. I think part of it, first off, it involves deciding that you actually want to do it, and that it is a community need, not just a few people over here doing something. And so I think I hear a lot of good intentioned people kind of going, oh, well, that's a good idea, but not there, and that's a good idea, but not there, and that's a good idea, but not there. And I think that that's a failure to understand the need is really what it is, and a failure to understand the people who need the housing. And so the more you can personalize that story, the more you can make it kind of a human heart issue versus a head issue, I think will help that go. And then of course you have to pick a right spot and you know, try to make it work.
I would just add though, because I know the folks in Thetford have been focused on this for quite a while, that for our small rural communities, one of the big obstacles is a lack of infrastructure. And no matter who the developer is, they're always trying to manage risk. And when there isn't public infrastructure, there is more risk. I was on a community visit with the Council on Rural Development in Montgomery a year or so ago, and they decided they're going to pursue a water and sewer system for their village in order to encourage not just housing, but other kinds of growth. Guilford did the same thing some years ago, and it may take focusing not just on the housing issue, but the infrastructure issue to get the kind of development that you want to have happen there. That said, I haven't given up on the idea that communities like Thetford ought to be able, to utilize the state and federal resources. We did do a project without infrastructure in Groton some years back. So it's not impossible, but it's more difficult.
I think I'll just add to that. It's not only infrastructure, but in rural communities that we have a scale challenge. So when you're looking at the investment of developing, you know, a rental property, that whether it's, you know, 19 or 30, there's a certain number you really need to get to make your investment work. You know, that sort of does it pencil out, whether it's, you know, affordable housing or market rate. And that's why you're not seeing, you know, market rate coming into the community, because what the cost is, and the cost of construction is very high right now, relative to what the community, you know, income is and what people can afford, are not in alignment. And we are seeing this in many areas around the state of Vermont. You know, there's probably fewer, if you count the towns, there's, you know, not that many towns that it works, and a lot of towns where it doesn't work. So, you know, I do think that we should continue to always try to crack the nut of, like, a Thetford, if they want to develop a substantial, you know, affordable housing project. But at the same time, we really need to be looking for alternative options, like accessory dwelling units, or, you know, like the shared living type things. We've got to get creative, because the fact of the matter is, you know, rural areas have never been served particularly well by the affordable housing that we're able to provide. And I mean, really, so Bradford is actually one of the areas where for a while there it worked pretty well, right? And we've built, I think, kind of the amount of affordable units that are likely needed, unless we got significantly more vouchers, right? So if we got more vouchers, we could probably build a little bit more. But so I encourage communities to really look at you know, innovative, creative ways to get at density as well, because, and there also are, you know, there are challenges to that finding. We joke in as developers, you know, my left arm for a flat piece of land near infrastructure. They are harder to come by than you might think, because not everybody wants to sell, you know, so people drive around the community and they think, oh, it'd be great if we did whatever, but you have to have a willing seller as well. So that's another, you know, aspect of what plays into this. But to answer the question, the other thing to think about is, you know, certainly you're working on zoning. Zoning is important, and not just like your zoning policy, but actually having a welcoming perspective from your select board. Select board members and, you know, planning people need to welcome and engage and want to work with developers. It's as much about, I mean, I don't love this analogy, but it sort of works. It's like, you got to kind of get, you know, primp yourself up for the date. You're trying to draw in developers. And so that isn't just about, you know, kind of saying we need it. It's about looking at, as Gus said, you know, having the hiking trails, having all the kinds of things in your community that are going to draw developers in. And I'll stop there.
That's great. Thanks, Eileen. Anybody else on that?
I would just quickly add, I think Eileen mentioned developers, and that tends to be a four-letter word in a lot of communities. There's a perception that there's an evil cadre of people looking to completely change the way your community looks. In the state of Vermont last year, there was a total of, I believe, about 800 total units pulled for permits. And of the housing stock built over the last several years, 58% of it's been affordable housing in terms of units added. That's not good news for our state, and it's a sign that the economies that Gus and Eileen were describing don't naturally work. So when there's an opportunity to support and help housing along any way we can, we should be trying to do that.
Okay, awesome, thanks. I'm gonna stay in the, I know there's a question, now I lost it. There was a question in the developer line of things. Somebody asking, should we, like, and this is, again, this needs to go like the town vision type thing, but from your perspective, are you like apartments versus condos? And we have space on our lower plane, and how to interest developers into, so that has water and sewers, flat, all that kind of stuff, around the shopping, that kind of stuff. So kind of how to go about leveraging that for good developers to jump in, and how do you even get them to, if we're primped up, like Eileen said, like how do we even get them to see if we're primped up?
So the Community Development Block Grant Program does have a planning grant portion to it. And if you've got vacant or rundown properties in town, it may be great to apply for one of those grants and get the community engaged in doing some problem solving about what should happen to those properties, whether it's residential or other uses, especially if it's in the core of your community. So that would be an immediate suggestion. Seth may want to comment more on the condominium question, but ever since the big financial meltdown of 2008, a big problem with condominium development is that the investors and lenders don't want to invest in condominium development unless you can show a large percentage of pre-sales in advance. So even in the Burlington market, very tough to develop condominiums right now. It may be possible to convert existing smaller scale buildings into condos, but without being able to show pre-sales, new construction of condominiums has been near impossible in Vermont for the last decade or so.
Monique, there's another thing that towns can do, and towns can actually just build the darn thing. You can buy the lot and you can build it. You can skip federal funding. You'll still have to go through some permitting and whatnot, but there's nothing that says you can't just decide this is a problem you're going to solve as a town. And then sell it, get your money back, go do it again.
Along those lines, there are a couple models that are happening right now in our region of where somebody's provided the land and they put out an RFP to developers and said, hey, we'll lease you this land. You build and manage the residences, and the lease terms will be low. So yeah, that's kind of the avenue Thetford was going down. The college is doing that right now in Lebanon. The hospital is getting ready to put out an RFP. That's one way to kind of reduce the cost, and also you get the better part of that is as a town or as the owner of the land, even though you're not necessarily.
Oh, we lost Mike. Seth, I know you were going to jump in.
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Hey, Mike, go ahead.
Last thing is, if you're the owner of the land, you get to control the terms. So you get to say, you work it out with the developer. You're a partner together. What are the rents going to be, and who you're renting to? So it may be that's too rich for any one town to do. We were lucky in Thetford. We had a trust fund that was able to put in a little bit of the seed money as a loan. But a number of towns could work together. As I say, I think of Bradford as my hub, and I could foresee, certainly the towns around saying, yeah, we could put in a little something for housing and just have a way to divide the benefits. So I'll step off the stage.
No, let's
Pass
go.
to Seth. He's always got good ideas.
I'll go, Seth.
I was just from a quick context standpoint, in homeownership applications this year, I believe our range was around between $286 and $413,000 per unit. So when you think about the idea of building affordable homeownership units or condos, that instantly indicates to you that there's going to be some level or source of subsidy necessary to make that generally affordable to the public. And a small tool that some, to Kevin's point, communities have used too is leveraging a housing trust fund, right? A local housing trust fund that can get involved where the community can use their own investment to combine with other state and federal resources that then have the outcomes that they specifically would like to see.
Yeah, so there's a few questions kind of related to the about property tax or making it, just kind of what you were talking about, Seth, making it more affordable for developers to be able to actually develop and then, pay property tax and all stuff. So I guess, are there things that the town should be looking into? Like I've just heard TIF districts thrown around and that kind of stuff. Are there programs like that the town should maybe be considering?
There are programs the state should be considering.
Okay.
Certainly, one of the things we're starting to advocate is that the state forego property tax on added value. So if I come in, I buy a crappy thing and I fix it up, you're not losing any money, you're just not making more money. So why not give me that tax advantage in return for some public benefit, where I put caps on the rent, or I do something, or there's something that I'm giving you back, but you just forego the property tax for a while. Why not? It's been used in other places.
I think one thing a community can do is certainly consider a housing trust fund. The communities that have those, it really does give them sort of give a developer a leg up, and it not only, when you're talking about a multi-million-dollar project, sometimes the amount that you can contribute isn't going to, change the decision yes or no to develop. But what it does is it really signals that the community cares about it, that they're willing to invest in it. So, Montpelier has it, South Burlington. There's great interest right now in Waterbury and the rest of the Mad River Valley to develop a housing trust fund. And I've been encouraging that because I do think it expresses to, developers and funders of affordable housing development that the community is really invested in it.
And just going to Kevin's point about the value of having young families with school-age kids in your community, even if you chose to use it for down payment assistance to help those young families stay in town, in some ways it may well be a net winner for you financially.
Yeah, just to add to that, Montpelier has that program. We administer that program, and they have penciled it out, and it is actually a net gain. So they're investing about $15,000 in a family, towards down payment assistance. And I feel like it's under 10 years, like 7 years or something, that it actually pays back because, you've got a kid in the school. So it makes a big difference.
Right, and there's questions, one specific topic we didn't really get to in questions, it was housing and trends for senior living. And I don't know if that's something you can all speak to as far as what's needed and what you even see as maybe even as far as incentives or something coming from the state for developing that kind of,
I'll make a comment.
Go ahead, Dale.
Just the new assisted care living home in Bradford I think is a tremendous asset, and it's taken the burden off some of the old folks that couldn't afford their homes or afford the taxes on them. We've noticed 1 or 2 of those coming on the market since people have moved into the assisted care homes. I think it's just been a tremendous plus for the community.
Yeah, I'll just say that, we looked at senior, what we would call independent apartments, not like the Margaret Papp facility, but about 5 years ago, And there certainly was a need for senior, but again, needing subsidies in order to make those work. The way most of the funding works in the state, there was a long period of time in the affordable housing development world where there was set aside money, sort of different sources of money for senior. There's still some of that, but not to the degree that we used to have. So it's really coming out of that same pot. But if you make a choice to dedicate it as senior, so I guess another way to say it is, about a third of my residents are senior, but I only have about 62 dedicated senior units out of 500. So you end up with so you don't necessarily have to fund it just as a senior. But there can be a benefit to a community that's just, people 62 and older from just the experience of living their perspective. So we saw the need, but we also knew that the Margaret Pratt facility was coming online, and we kind of said, all right, well, let's sort of see how that impacts the community. So I would be interested to know, and I think certainly a step to take at this point is really we need to do an updated market study of Bradford and what the needs are. The most recent one we have is from 2015 when we redid Colonial Village, and that's and Bradford has really changed a lot in the past 7 years. And also, I'll just say, I drove recently through the 5 and 25 intersection there, the Lower Plain, and yeah, there's definitely some opportunity there. I was kind of getting excited about like, whoa, look at it. I mean, it's really a lot more energy down there, which is exciting. And I don't know if that's part of a downtown designation down there, but that might be something that we would want to try to address too as a community.
Okay, let's see. There's a question about what type of incentives or support is being provided to from the state to entrepreneurs to develop rental units and housing units by making loans easier and more affordable to obtain or expand rental assistance.
So I think Gus and Eileen both hit on a pretty important theme, which is if you go back to the planning process and creating a clear vision for what your community is trying to achieve, there's a path, right, to consistently then getting additional funding along the way. Because as important as a project getting a low interest loan, from an agency like ours, or investment from the Home or Housing Trust Fund program, which are federal programs through Vermont Housing Conservation Board and Gus, is lowering things like the infrastructure cost by ensuring that your communities had opportunities to spend money through the state in a lot of cases, as Eileen mentioned, through the designation process. Do you have sidewalks? How's your public transportation? Answering those types of questions. The state's very organized in the way that they prioritize spending on infrastructure and community development, and it's a stream. So I always encourage communities, meet with them. Gus mentioned the planning grants. That's a great way to start to steer yourself into that funding stream that can bring great resources in. And then just that is the purpose that we serve, is we manage state and federal tax credits and use the state and leverage the state's bonding authority to try to create housing and lower cost housing whenever possible. So that does exist, but a community can solve some of those other problems mentioned.
Okay, so make sure nobody else wants to add on to that. There's a question, to what extent, going back to the senior questions, to what extent had the aging in place slowed the turnover of affordable housing to younger families? I don't know if anybody on this call might know that, or even speaking regionally or statewide. Yeah, Seth, go ahead. Nope.
No, we've got more research on our website on this than I can spit out at you. Okay. But just to Eileen's point, our general occupancy housing, because of our population, overserves our population that's also eligible for age-restricted housing. So we've tended to work towards universal design and accessibility across all types of housing whenever possible, and encourage communities to be thoughtful in your planning conversations about targeting specific age group housing, unless you've got this really strong documented need, that's important.
Well, I think what the question is trying to get at, maybe Seth, is more, so if people are aging in place, houses stay in their hands longer, and people may be aging in place by choice, but they also may be aging in place because we don't have enough communities, whether they're affordable or not. We don't have enough communities for people to go. We have a huge shortage in assisted living and nursing level care, but we also have, we know that a lot of seniors, at least nationally, I'm still unclear about Vermonters because I do think they want to still be hauling their wood in at 95, but on their own piece of land. But, there is more interest in having communities for seniors to move into, and then that frees up those single family homes. And to get at what Mike was saying about density within the home. I mean, the big trend in the state, for everyone, I guess, is that, there used to be 5 or 6 people living in a home, and that home's still the same size, and there's 2, maybe 3 people living in it. That's the biggest number that, we somehow have to crack. But so I do think that, I think probably the aging place is a thing that is affecting, the availability of homes. And it sounds like Dale was saying, a few came online with the Margaret Pratt facility coming online a few years ago, but probably not enough.
Yeah. We see that issue. I was looking at some Woodstock numbers today. We have enormous numbers of seniors living in houses by themselves, if not just with 2 people. And a lot of them don't want to move. A lot of them don't need to move, but they have way more house than they need. And so programs like Home Share, where you try to match a homeowner with somebody who can live in the house and help things go along, also some more ability to actually kind of condominiumize that house and say, okay, you've got your kitchen you love, and we just need a new bathroom over here, and then we can build a rental over here. One of the things we're proposing is to create a utility to type of do that, because everybody doesn't need to become a general contractor on building ADUs in their houses. Instead, just call up Build ADU in my house, and they come over and they go, we can do it here, and it'll cost you $80,000, and that pencils out to this, and we'll be in tomorrow. That type of thing would be helpful for people to get it done as a nonprofit.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
A personal story. In the house I live in Thetford, it was built by my father-in-law, and he really wanted to be able to age in place, and that was not going to be feasible for him and my mother-in-law until 10 years ago, or a little more than that. When my wife and I started talking about where might we want to be in the world, and we said, you grew up in Thetford, and I'm looking for a small town to make the rest of my life in, so let's consider Thetford. And a lot of family conversation, and kind of came around to what do we hope for. Again, my father-in-law said, I would like to live here the rest of my life. So with 4 of us here, that is financially feasible, and it also is emotionally and socially feasible. Especially during this pandemic, it's we have connection with each other. It's not all just trying to survive on Zoom. But there's another element that the pandemic has brought into play too, which has made it even more feasible. I was lucky enough to have a job pre-pandemic that I could be largely remote. I started the last couple of years this work with Vital Communities, and if I hadn't had something nearby that I could commute to, then we'd have had to live somewhere else. And so that sharing a home made it possible for me to work for a nonprofit, at a nonprofit salary, and us to be able to afford a home. And to go a little further with that, kind of looking into the future, there's this feasibility of remote work that I think we'll be doing a lot more like this. And And so it makes it, again, possible for people to be, aging in place by choice, but having it be financially and socially and physically feasible. And I'll say that, that's just a personal story I'm sharing because it worked out. But but I will say, echoing what you said, Kevin, about Woodstock, the Thompson Senior Center, they've heard from their members or their clients, hey, we want to stay in our homes, but they're too big or too much for us. And so Thompson started partnering with, before the home share organizations merged, partnering to create a satellite office. And the pandemic and merger and things like that slowed that down. But that model's out there. And that's something that a Bradford region could lead as well. To say, hey, let's do something for our seniors who want to stay in the places they are, match them up, support them in connections and relationships so that there's the financial and the social and the emotional, physical help to be where they want to be for their lives. So I think it's definitely feasible. It does require, it's not a program. It's got to be personal. It's got to be story by story, person by person.
And I think this is a good group for this question. To paraphrase, does the presence of affordable and kind of the connotations of that or subsidized housing inherently restrict the growth or value of surrounding properties? Are there ways to foster more affordable housing initiatives while still supporting the value of surrounding properties?
Increase in our area.
So I think the two are not, the affordable doesn't have to go hand in hand with crappy. I think our units are fairly affordable. They're not exorbitantly expensive compared to, I check Craigslist every once in a while just to see what's out there and make sure that we're kind of on the mark. And I feel like if you do it right, it can improve the neighborhood. It doesn't have to be a detriment if done right. So I don't think that's an assumption that affordable decreases the value of surrounding areas. Unfortunately, it's the perception, and I think that's what happened in Thetford. Not to kick a hornet's nest, I know there's some people here that are also probably involved in that, and that was kind of it was unfortunate, but the general perception in Thetford with that project was, I don't want it here because I see it as a negative. So.
Yeah, throw in a financial picture, and you can get many more details on this at kind of a statewide level. And on the registration page, there was a link to a analysis called From the Outskirts to Downtown, looking at land values and what happens when you use properties in different ways. And the properties that are most rewarding for a community in the short term and the long term, that is in terms of property value and social and community value, are the mixed use, smaller, affordable apartments and houses, where you have businesses and things close together. And those are places that provide benefit for years and years. And they are not necessarily the high-end luxury place that you might think of as the most rewarding. They tend to be the really basic mom and pop space on Main kind of place. So so I think that's, to put your points there, you can do something that is nice, that is reasonable quality. You don't need luxury to get value. And in fact, also in the end, the stuff that gives you the most value is that kind of mid-quality, affordable place where normal people live.
Yeah. I watched one of Mike's videos, and then I took a look around Bradford. And if you were to go up a Bank Street in Bradford and look on the small house on the corner on the left, that house gives you $1.4 million in value per acre. It beats like all your other property practically in town. And it beats the residential property just across the street by a factor of 22. So you kind of go, maybe that house valued at $90,000 on 1.4 acres is an opportunity for us to look at housing.
Well, thanks, Kevin. I know, Eric, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm just personally, I live in the New North End of Burlington. And even, in the New North End, where we have a pretty good amount of population, we had an affordable housing projects, several affordable housing projects on one site proposed. It's about 100 units. And it was built right next to our Hannafords. It was built right next to our bagel shop. It was built right next to our restaurant. And I feel that that project is making sure that those businesses are going to be there for the long haul. Without those units, the restaurants most certainly in the bagel shop would not survive the long haul. So I've been to the restaurants, been to the bar that's in the restaurant and talked to people, and they love it. They love that, they have all of these people that are consumers. So it's a really good economic development. It supports economic development incredibly.
One question that I haven't seen come up in the Q&A, but I feel like it comes up at every single meeting anywhere, is what are younger people, what are millennials looking for that are like my age in their 30s, have a family? What are they asking for in Vermont as far as the housing stock goes?
I think we all have our theories about the small house and, small little place, minimalist with a shelf to put your MacBook on and a hook to hang your bike on. But I just want to throw out there, and Mike alluded to this, I think we could see a significant change in the next decade of what people want. And I'm telling myself that, one of the gifts of COVID, we sort of have this thing at work where we try to come up every week with some gift of COVID. And I think one of the potential gifts could be this remote working thing and the social isolation that we have all experienced and the desire to be closer to family and connected. And I think places like Bradford are going to be appealing to young people. And they might actually want to live in a regular old home and have a different sort of lifestyle if they're working remotely and they're in the home, all day. I have a daughter who would never consider coming back to Vermont, and she's now going, geez, maybe I can live in Vermont now. And the never consider was because the job market. So I don't know, just to leave on, to end the meeting with something optimistic. I think it will be really interesting to see what happens in the next 5 years and how a community might, dress themselves up for that to attract that population. Could be a really interesting conversation. And, like the kind of work that you're doing, Monique, really fits well with that.
Definitely. Thank you.
If I can contribute
yeah.
to Monique.
Go ahead, Darren.
Especially being in the same age bracket. We're seeing a lot of diversity now. I think that 10 years ago, even 20 years ago, we were seeing that, 19, 20 to 25 was when people were buying homes, starting families. Now that timeline has been shifted probably 6 or 7 years now. So that timeline is now when you get into the 27s, 28s, 29s, 30s. We are also seeing, especially Newberry being a prime example, that people are looking to move into that small, quaint town. They don't want a gas station. They don't want a traffic light. They want somewhere where they can, know they can walk easily with their kids, walk their dogs. We just had an acquisition of a home that they're going to turn a 3-story house into a huge familial home, and they're going to do a lot of reno on that house. In the future, that could be another listing that would be in probably the $300,000 range that right now is going for less than 200. And I think that, there's so much diversity now, and hopefully in the next 10 years, we do see it kind of zero in on people buying homes again. But we are also having a rental issue. A lot of my friends and a lot of my acquaintances are having issues finding suitable housing just because they don't want to live in a closet with a bathroom and a bedroom where you can hear everything that's happening in the kitchen. So it's a lot of diversity and a lot of change. But like I said, hopefully in the next 10 years, we move back into that acquisition of a home rather than, a lot of rentals, because I think that that's important for this area.
Awesome, thanks. And I know as someone who often has back-to-back Zooms, I want to be, if any of the panelists have to jump off, I get it. I think we're just, I'll let Kevin go, and then I'm just gonna just think about like next steps for this kind of discussion.
I'm gonna have to leave you.
Thanks, Gil.
Thank you. Thanks everyone. Great panel.
I just wanted to jump on the conversation about telecommuting because if you look at climate migration as an upcoming issue and where people want to live, people aren't stupid, right? They can look at the same data I look at, and you go, of all the 4,000 counties in the United States, Vermont's 14 counties are like all in the top 50. And real estate companies are going to look at that. People buying houses are going to look at that. Speculators are going to look at it. They're all going to go, I want to be a place that doesn't burn up, doesn't dry up, and doesn't drown, right? Bradford, not many places in urban areas fit one of those situations, and Bradford fits all of them. So yeah, we're going to see more people as they brighten up. And you don't have to have, you just have to have 1% of people in dense areas decide to do something, and that's all we need.
Thanks, Kevin. Hey, go ahead, Seth.
I want to say, like, the fact that, Monique, you're leading this conversation is like what gives us the best hope for the future. And that's that people in your seat, in your position with the way you're seeing the world, are engaged in thinking and talking about housing and opportunities for people to find places to live. So just applaud to you, and hope that that spreads like wildfire in the community, because that's what will keep this energy going. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Seth. Awesome. Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
I'll just beat the drum of individual change here at the end, and share another story. A friend of mine, he happens to live out in Illinois. He's 29 now, and he was trying to figure out, where am I going to live? How can I afford to live? I don't want to move to St. Louis, right? And so he got his folks to lend him money to buy a house, and he then rents to 3 friends, and that rent pays back his folks, and all 4 of them know each other and enjoy living together, and they also like to do home projects. So as they're fixing up the place, because it was a bit of a fixer-upper when they got it, they're keeping track of what they put in, with the agreement that whenever someone buys out, they kind of get a chunk of the value of the true value. So it's a really good setup that this one guy did on his own, using kind of individual family relationships, and to make that feasible. And I think that's those sort of things we need to help each other do as independent. Be brave and be experimental, and not rely on someone else's market or subsidy to make things happen. Not that they hurt, and we should be thinking big too, but we need to encourage the small entrepreneurial, again, space on Main type business. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Mike. Anybody else on closing? Awesome. So in the chat still is the spaceonmain.org/housing. So definitely, panelists, if you have any other resources you want me to add to that page from this discussion, I can definitely do that. And then anybody kind of as an attendee, definitely feel free. If there's things that, I guess, outstanding questions that you had, or things that you'd like to see another discussion on, or like if you want to be involved in next steps. I know, actually, Linda, I wanted to give you a second to just talk about the task force.
Sure. So it's actually the Upper Valley Continuum of Care, which is I co-chair, and that covers the greater Upper Valley. So we have some folks from the Lebanon area as well that sit there. And we are trying to look at the continuum of housing from homelessness to permanent housing. And we're hoping that we can sort of guide conversations throughout our entire region about what does it look like to look at that continuum of housing in each of our communities. How do we make sure that people that are homeless are being served, are safe, have access to services while they are going down that line of getting into permanent housing. And we are hoping to set up or work with groups that may already exist in each of our microregions. So I'm not sure if there's a group that exists in Bradford. I've not been made aware of one, but it's something that we will definitely be interested in reaching out to folks in this region soon, to start talking about strategic plan and who needs to be at the table. And one of the things we really want to emphasize is the fact that we recognize that we've consistently tried to solve the issues around homelessness and housing, but it has been sort of a one-sided conversation, with generally being community service providers at the table, and we're not going to resolve it because these are community problems and they have to have community resolution. So figuring out how we bring landlords to the table, developers to the table, select board members to the table, community members to the table, and all have a conversation together, where we can talk about this issue of we've got community members who are losing their housing because they're lost their job or their job just doesn't pay enough, but they have ties in that community. Why are we forcing them out of the community to get services? How do we solve the problem of not having access to homeless assistance within the communities people live in, and then have access to the money they need or the units to be able to stay in their communities where their families might be, or their kids' school might be, or their job might be? So that's my plug. So you may be hearing from us soon. And if it's something you're interested in conversing more about, we would love to have you at the table.
Thanks, Linda. Awesome. And I saw Kevin put the Keiss to the Valley, so I'll add that to the website. Thank you all so much. I know it's 5 minutes over, so thank you so much for staying a little bit late. I really appreciate it, and I'll follow up with all of you. And the recording will be posted to the website, and it's on Facebook if you want to share. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.